All right, folks, welcome. Great to have you all here. My name is Brooke Bachesta. I'm an XDR Enablement Manager here at Outreach, and I'm joined by two of my pals, Brian Tratuschold from Ambition and Mark Kosoglow, also from Outreach. And today we're going to talk about coaching. But before we do that, I want to do some intros. So Brian, go ahead. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you work, all that jazz.
Yeah, so Brooke, as you said, I'm Brian Tratuschold. I'm the COO and co-founder at Ambition. Ambition is a sales gamification and coaching platform for large enterprise and mid-market sales teams. Yeah, I mean, we were just doing background. Like, I feel like I'm back in lawn mowing mode right now. But what I do most of the time is, spend time with sales leaders who are trying to get their teams to be higher performing, developing better retention of their teams, and operating at the highest level.
Awesome. Mr. Kosoglow, go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Mark. I lead sales at Outreach. Employee one, been around for a long time. Like Brian, I used to mow grass too back when I was a teenager. And listen, just trying to figure out how to make sure that the machine keeps running here at Outreach. Super fun. Honored to do it every day.
Love it. We were all, for folks on the call, we were talking about jobs we had in high school. I don't know if I mowed lawns, but I definitely hustled all my sister's friends. We had horses growing up, and I knew that they wanted to ride my horse, so I would charge them to do so, and then put on horse camps where they would tack up the horses, clean up the tack room, help muck the stalls, and that was my summer job in middle school. So
Smart. Cornered the market.
Thank
cornered
you.
The horse market.
Thanks.
How about it?
But yeah, so today we're talking about coaching. So like great ways to do it, ways to scale it, process to put in place. But I think we can't talk about great coaching if we don't also talk about maybe some not so awesome coaching that either we've received or given. So in the spirit, I can start here with just talking about, like, I have been a horrible coach. And I think like most sales reps, I got promoted into a manager role after being a really good SDR with exactly zero training on how to become a people manager outside of like captaining a volleyball team or, I don't know, running a club in high school. And growing up in the Northwest, everybody here is very polite, like to a fault. I don't know if Mark, you noticed that when you lived here, but people are very passive. So I was terrified of offending people. And so I realized that I was becoming the queen of, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, but I was the queen of the shit sandwich, where like I could not give feedback to save my life. And I would call someone in, be like, Brian, you're such an integral part of this team. We love having you around. However, your call conversion, like everybody else on the team, is at like 20%. You're at a 2, not great, but you'll get there. And I have no problem. And we just love having you on the team. And people would leave being like, I don't know. Yeah, if I got promoted, if I'm getting fired, I don't know what's happening. I'm just going to do exactly what I was doing before because Brooke cannot give feedback. So I learned later that to be clear is to be kind, and that beating around the bush is not helpful at all. But do either of y'all have stories of things you've received or feedback you've given that was not so great?
You want to go, Brian?
Mark, you want to go? I can. I think, I'll echo Brooke in that I've been a really, really poor coach multiple times for many, many years. I don't know that I'm actually good yet. I'm still working on it. Maybe we all are. But yeah, I mean, as early, similar situation, I think a lot of us were, maybe a rep or a lead rep on a team, became a team lead, became a manager. And through that process, I think as a younger person, it's hard to like change your identity. And so like, you're still trying to be part of the crew if you're on the team or, the guys and gals you were selling with. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I'm responsible for a different set of KPIs to the business now. Like my success is them being really good versus me being cool and like hanging out. And I think I did a similar thing, which was like, I was not great at holding people accountable. I was not great at giving, ways that they could improve other than being like, let's hang out and talk for 20 minutes. And people don't get better that way. They're like, I like Brian, but if I'm not hitting quota, or if I'm not making money, I'm probably not going to stay here. That was not a great way to manage it as a, person in their mid to late 20s.
Yeah, it is hard to get out of the I want to be liked box when you're right. You just moved off of all of your peers are now your direct reports. Can be uncomfortable.
I still want to be liked. Am I screwing up?
No, I still want to too.
Well, yeah, so here my name's Mark. I'm a recovering horrible manager too. So I have a very specific, like literally 1 day event that told me I
Oh boy.
sucked after 18 months on the job. So I was in my first sales leadership position, thought I was moving and shaking, not doing the stuff I hated, doing cool, new, fun stuff, trying to be, a little different, and I wrote this email to my team to kind of launch this initiative or this project. And I get this email back from one of my reps named Mike Seipel. And now you got to remember, I am the youngest sales director at this company by probably 15 years. And almost every one of my reps is more experienced and probably a better seller than me, except I did sell myself really well in the interview, obviously. And so I'm sitting in my computer. His replies come back in to my email and he's like, Mark, why do we got to do this? You make us do so much stuff that's not related to the job. Like I'm really, having a hard time doing this and this and this. And this guy was constantly complaining and I got so upset and I hit forward, typed a note to my boss. What do I do with this guy? He's such an asshole. Like he's the only one on my team that doesn't get it. I think I need to get rid of him. What do you think you can do? You used to manage him. Well, guess what, y'all? I didn't hit forward. I hit reply.
Oh, no.
And my homeboy Mike Seipel got the email, and my
did you know, or did
I didn't know?
I'm thinking later.
I'm thinking, okay, bent over. Wait till I'll see what
I feel so much better.
So my phone's sitting next to my computer, and the little green button and the red button. Mike Seipel pipes up on their incoming call, red or green button. Which one do you think I pressed? I pressed the red one. And I'm like, oh no, what am I gonna do? Then my boss calls me and I'm like, well, okay. And he's like, Mark, do you realize that your rep got this email too, not just me? And I was like, oh no. And so I was like, all right, let me think about it. So my family was, I was meeting my family somewhere for a weekend little trip. And halfway there, I'm like, okay, I gotta be a real human here. I gotta own my stuff. I gotta talk to this guy. So I pull over on the side of the road and I call him and I'm like, Mike, like, hey, what do you think? And he just goes after me. Like for 10 minutes, he just cusses me out. How could you do this to me? I've been a top 3 rep at this company, constant performer. He's like, you don't know what you're doing. You haven't even really put on your sales underwear yet, much less your sales suit. He's like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, Mike, you know what? I apologize that you got that email, but I hate to tell you this, that's exactly how I feel. And you know what it did is we both kind of calmed down in that moment, and it helped me understand that like I wasn't really leading and managing my people. I was just trying to like figure out cool things to do and initiatives that made me look good and probably were a pain in the ass to all my reps. And so went back in, studied, did my schoolwork, and figured out what I was doing. I think I turned around, but I did get a letter from that guy. He stayed with the team for another year or two. Right as he was about to leave, he sent me a letter. I think I still have it. And he said, Mark, he's like, I know we started out with our differences, but I want to let you know in the last year, you've become the best sales manager I've ever had. And I'll never forget our conversation that day. And obviously I've never forgotten it either. But I think that is a really dramatic story or example of most of us, when we get into managing, have no idea what we're doing. Nobody sits down to train us. Nobody kind of shows us the ropes. We spend 10 months ramping up a rep and 10 days ramping up a manager. And like, I bet you more managers are in that position than you think you are. And like, I'm hopeful that today we can go over a few things that we've each learned that can kind of maybe accelerate your pace to getting to be the manager that you want to be. So.
Wow. Yeah, well, at least there's a nice ending to your story of you two are homies again.
My man, Mike Seipel. I love him. I appreciate him so much.
I mean, yeah, talk about getting forced into a vulnerable conversation situation too.
Yeah.
Which I guess, worked out well. Which actually brings us to a topic of like, when we do have coaching sessions, like should there be a specific time and place? Like some folks just do it like, oh, like off the cuff, like after your call, slack you some things. Other people set aside time during the week or month, or like this is your specific coaching time. How do y'all think about giving feedback to folks? Maybe Brian, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to do it well, and maybe you got to find the right way for yourself. But you know, we see this all the time in our work with customers, serving them. And one of the things that I've experienced, I've been guilty of, and I think most of the organizations we step into, is coaching happens either at the performance review cycle. So like, I'm going to have a performance review ever so often. Some companies it's like 12 months, some companies maybe 3 months. And that can be either really well prepared or very ad hoc. And if you say, how do you coach? They give you 3 other answers. One, I check in. I'm walking by Mark's desk. I'm like, Mark, what's up? How are you doing? And I call that drive-by coaching. I'm still bad about that, but it is the way a lot of people historically have coached. One flaw with that is it's totally been broken by COVID. Like there's not the opportunity to do that thing anymore. Another flaw is that it's not structured. It's not consistent. It's kind of just this, you know, friendly chit chat situation. And then people will tell you about how they do pipeline reviews or deal management or call reviews, call management. And I don't know about Mark or you, Brooke, but like when I started, it was like you sat down next to someone, you had the aux cord to their headset, and you did call coaching for like a day where you listened to people's calls.
And you'd slack them what to say frantically. Don't be distracted, but read my Slack while talking to your prospect.
Yeah, the manager's like bumping you, and they like ask the question you're supposed to like hit a home run on. So net, I think all of those things need to happen in a certain way. I believe that the coaching has to be recurring, structured, consistent. It's very important. Research shows that you should be prepared. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point here. And it should be frequent. It shouldn't just be like, hey, the only time you're going to get feedback like what Mark gave, or you know, the shit sandwich that you gave. That can't just be once a year, once every 6 months. Like there needs to be a consistent approach to that's happening so that people can develop.
Yeah, totally. And Mark, I know you talked about like the difference between one-on-one versus a coaching session. Maybe you can share more about what you think about those 2 different types of meetings.
Yeah, this is something that a mistake I made for years, which is I thought my job was, you know, there's lots of parts of my job, but I thought one part specifically was running a good one-on-one. And what I found is that the term one-on-one means something different to every person. And it's because it's so ambiguous, it's hard to really run a good one when who knows what one is, right? And so, you know, I think that there's, you know, 3 kind of crucial conversations that Brian alluded to. There's what I call the one-on-one, which is the personal, how are you doing? You know, your vacation last week, tell me some cool stuff that happened. Oh, what's going on in your career? Like, you know, oh, did you listen to this podcast? You know, and it's a very loose relationship building conversation that should have a little structure to it, but really should just be 2 people talking and getting to know each other better and really getting deeper in their relationship. Then there's the pipeline review, which is deal X is closing by Y date for Z amount of dollars, and this is your next step, and this is the forecast category stage, and you're verifying data basically and making sure reps are feeling like, I know what to do to move an opportunity forward. And then the last is skill-based coaching. And skill-based coaching is, hey, how do I do an introductory call better? How do I negotiate better? How do I pick better accounts to target for my prospecting, right? And so I think like when you divide the one-on-one up into those 3 buckets, it allows you to have a specific bucket for each thing, because otherwise what happens is they all kind of get intermingled and you do none of them well. And so I really think that that's an important distinction to have. And we over-rotate to skills. And I maybe some of you have had some learnings from Jeff Risley. He's has the Sales Mental Health Institute, and he talks about it like this: is like LeBron James comes to his coach and says, "Coach, I need to take tomorrow's game off. Like I'm beat." And his coach looks at LeBron James and says, "You know what, LeBron? actually you need to get in the gym and work on your jumper more so that you can play tomorrow. And that's what we do with salespeople. Salespeople need time off. They need time to think and be creative. And instead we hit them up with another skills training, which actually adds to their cognitive load and their inability to perform. And so that's why I think it's super important to have those distinctions of buckets. So you can have the pacing right and be providing the needs that your reps have based on how they're looking in each of those areas.
Yeah, such a good point of like just being prepared to receive feedback or talk about something specific. Do y'all require folks to come like prepared with a specific agenda for one-on-ones versus pipeline review? Like how do people know outside of what the title of the invite says, what they should bring?
I think it's key. I mean, Mark's referring to, that initial one where you're relationship building. I don't think it has to be, I agree. Like it doesn't need to be like, tell me your top 10 interests and like, this weird survey deal. But I do think that needs to have a really consistent cadence. People need to know what they're showing up for. But on the other two, if you're doing pipeline review, deal review, if you're doing career development conversation, like I think one of the most frustrating things as a rep was when you show up and like, sometimes I'm sure you both have experienced this, like it's really burning on your mind. Like you're one of one and like the manager may have, 10 of you or 8 or whatever. And so it might not be as burning of like, what's Brian's problem today or what's his big next goal in life or his career path that he wants to talk about. So to have what we call the answers to the test, like I want to know so that I'm mentally prepared to put myself in the right frame of reference, have some thinking before the conversation starts. Mark, you kind of mentioned it, like, I don't want to just weave around and be like, hey, how was your weekend, blah, blah. I'm trying to kill like 8 to 12 minutes of that conversation. I want to go in and be like, hey, I saw that you really care about this thing or you're really struggling with this. Let's workshop it. Let's volley this back and forth real quick and get into it. So I want the answers to the test and vice versa. That tells the rep that like the manager's showing up prepared. He's not coming in cold and saying like, hey, what did we talk about last time? I forget what did I commit to? Was I supposed to give you some resources on like what the promotion path looks like here or what I think, the next role for you at admission is. So I think it's crucial to have, like I said, the answers to the test and then keep track of that stuff somewhere. If it goes into the ether, it's not being utilized, in that person's development.
Totally. Which actually brings up a topic around just like accountability of like, if you've given a rep something to work on, but then never ask about it again, like, I don't know if it's really considered coaching or just like word vomiting at your person. Like what are some ways we could share with our audience on how to help keep your people accountable?
Listen, I think accountability is just one thing. It's, does a manager do it or not? You know what I mean? Like I use Evernote to keep track of what I talked about in the last meeting, what I asked them to do, and then I talk about it in the next meeting. Brian, you have software that probably does a better job than Evernote of doing that kind of stuff. But it doesn't matter what you have. If you don't do it as a manager and a leader, you're just not going to do it. And like, there's no like automated robot wandering around monitoring all your conversations and reminding you the next time you talk to the person to talk about it. Like you have to develop that as a discipline. Like, did you develop listening as a discipline as a seller? Well, you got to deliver this as a discipline as a leader. And I can't stand, and I just actually did a LinkedIn post yesterday, the amount of initiatives I see at companies that just fade away into the darkness, they don't end. It's just like, hey, remember 3 months ago when like prospecting was like so important, it was crazy and nobody's talking about prospecting for 4 weeks. That kind of stuff makes you lose legitimacy like super fast. So then everybody says, well, all you got to do is hold them off for 3 or 4 weeks and then they quit talking about it. And then, so nobody ever does anything, right? And so that's how I view accountability is I think you just need to have a tool or a process that you're committed to using that meets your needs. And then you got to develop a little discipline and use it.
And I'm so glad you said that, Mark, because I feel like, oh, go ahead, Brian.
Sorry. No, I would add to that. And I think maybe I may disagree a little bit because, and this is one of the areas where I think so much worthwhile investment has been put into our customers or our market in general of like, how do you make the rep better and better and better and better and better? And like, you give them all these tools, and we've got reps who are like more powerful, more maybe efficient with their time than ever before, which is amazing. And we see like, I think we're catching up to where the companies are doing the same thing for the manager or for the team lead or for an enablement person who may serve that team. And I think that's key because, you know, the impact and the leverage of having a person who is great at coaching or managing, whatever the word you want to use, and delivering that accountability, holding people accountable, pushing them to develop, that leverage is huge because the manager, like I said, on average, they have 8 to 10 reports, sometimes more. If they can get those people to be a little bit better, I want them using every tool and process and trick in the book to do it because I think they're going to have an outsized impact on my org being successful. And so to me, it's not as, I would advocate for every org to like figure out a tool, be committed to it, and then utilize that to coach at an effective, consistent rate.
Yeah.
And be clear
like,
about what the accountability is.
Yeah, like starting with the end in mind, like knowing we said that here's the initiative, like here's where we are and where we're trying to get to. But what you said, Mark, about just like having discipline, I talked to a lot of folks who are like, well, can't we just automate? They're like, oh, why won't it just remind me? Like, I talked to Steve Ross about this before, where he's like, that's the work though. Like that's what a person has to do of like, remember to go check those things. And if you keep it on a Post-it note or whatever you do, can't have the robots do everything. So there is some level of like, you got to Nancy Drew your way into what problem am I solving before I'm just spewing out advice, unsolicited advice to my reps.
Yeah.
So y'all have built companies and scaled them and built teams. And like one thing that I think can be tricky is like when you hire a sales coach, like how do we help them not just do when I was a rep, Brooke did things this way, so just do it the way that I did it and look exactly like my emails do, and then you'll be good to go. But if you got 15 different sales managers, now you have 15 different business units doing their own thing. So Mark, I mean, how many sales managers do we have these days? I don't even know. Definitely over 20.
20.
Yeah. How do you think about that? Of like making sure that we're adhering to a process and not just do it my way or the highway?
I consider myself a very operationally minded sales leader. I tend to think of sales as more of science than art. And if you believe that, then you have to back it up by having the formulas and processes of success. And so to me, and I'll get a little personal here, I have a really horrible memory, horrible. And I know that about myself. And one day I was driving home for being a rep in the field, and I was getting off the exit ramp in my little town. And 1 mile past the exit ramp is my little house with my 4 kids and wife running around all day, like doing God's work with them. And right in between, half a mile is a grocery store. My wife calls me as I'm getting off the exit ramp. She's like, babe, been super crazy day with the kids. Can you grab some milk for me? I'm like, gotcha, baby, no problem. Guess what I do? Right past that grocery store like it didn't even exist, like nobody ever called me. I walk in the door, hey, what's up everybody, daddy's home, where's the milk? I got so pissed off at myself. Like here my wife is slogging all day long, helping our kids, taking care of the house, paying the bit, like all the millions of things she does, and I can't remember for 3 seconds to pick up milk to make her day a little easier. Like I'm feeling like I'm failing like a husband, like a human, right? So I get in the car, I go get the milk, I come back, and I'm taking a shower like the next morning, and I'm thinking, how do I keep this from happening? And I read this book called Getting Things Done by David Allen that immediately within 3 weeks relieves 70% of my stress, because I realized I was so busy trying to remember what to do that I was not using my brain to figure out what I should be doing. And what I've distilled all that book and the subsequent, decade and a half of practice in this area is that if you have a process, you can rely on the process to get you the results that it's going to get. It might not get you in this quarter, it might not get you in the next quarter, but over time, the process is designed to get to you. No matter how bad it is, you can rest in knowing the process is there, and your brain is freed up to be super creative inside of that process. And so if you want reps to do their best work, give them a process and the guidelines, they'll be infinitely creative inside those guidelines. If you never give them a process or guidelines, they spend all their time trying to figure one out. And so I think that that's like the key to me is stop being, oh, we're micromanaging. Oh, we're doing this. Figure out a good, fair, strong process that generates what you think it's supposed to generate. Do your part of iteratively measuring it and making it better and course correcting over time. But have your reps and managers understand that their success is in doing the process, not getting the outcome. And I think that when you kind of flip the script that way, you see a huge difference in how your reps and managers view process, and you get a lot more buy-in. And then when they start helping creating their own processes, that's when it becomes kind of like this self-fulfilling prophecy of, we want to be more process oriented. All right, well then develop a process for this. Okay, now it's mine. I'm going to make sure people do it. Otherwise I look like an idiot. And now people are doing it, right? And you just do that over and over again.
Totally. And speaking of giving people time to think, like if you're constantly putting out fires where all 15 of your reps are slacking you 80 million times a day because they forgot how to do things or they're asking for approval, like you will never, I sure didn't get any work done when I lived my life like that. So, no. And building a process is totally different depending on the maturity of a company, right? Because when you're early stage startup, like everybody's got 15 different jobs because there's a lot that needs to get done and there's not that many people. And so there's like a looser process. Whereas if you're a Fortune 500 company, like you have a very specific swim lane that you stay in. So how are y'all thinking about like, okay, like the process needs to evolve so that I can better support, the managers can support the reps and then I can make things for the managers. How are you thinking about like changing process as you grow?
Yeah, I can take that. Once again, I would totally echo Mark here. Like, once you have a process, sales process, pipeline development process, how do you get people into the meeting set, whatever their role is, like all the time. We see this with customers. We see this with people we work with. They change a new thing. They roll out a new product, or they have some incentive, or they want to do a totally new customer segment, and it changes all these things. And to Mark's point, if it's not defined, people go truly haywire. They're like, or they just don't do it. They're like, I'm just sticking with what I know. I'm not messing with the new product. I'm not attaching the SKU to the sale. So you have to be hyper clear with like, hey, here's how you do it. I'm going to show you why it's important to the business. I'm going to align whatever the thing is you do, the activity day to day, week to week, month to month, to our business objective or the thing that we care about. And I think you have to get ground level with like, hey, sales rep, this is why it's important to me, manager, or me, VP, or me, CRO. And here's why we're going to measure it, because we really care that over the next 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 2 years, this becomes a core part of our business or a core part of what you do. And then you talk about it consistently, and you have a very clear barometer of, is it happening to the level we want? Is it happening at the quality we want? Are you effective enough in the process? And you keep tweaking, like Mark said, it doesn't have to be set and forget. That's probably not the right thing. It's continually iterative. It needs to be data driven, and it needs to be a conversation where, a rep doesn't feel like someone from on high is just throwing curveballs at them to figure something out. They can align and understand that this is why we're doing this, and this is how it impacts me and the business.
Yeah, 100%. And like helping people not feel the whiplash of like things are going to change. If you're in a high growth company, they're going to change all the time, but making sure that they're bought in and understand the why. Have y'all had situations in which like you unintentionally created whiplash or like a super reactive change in process that you think might have been difficult, like things to avoid? Never, ever.
Never, right? Never, Mark.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know how to answer that question. Listen, like here's the thing is, in the absence of priorities, everything is a priority. And then you have to balance that with the other side of the coin. When everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And so what ends up happening is if leaders and managers aren't anchored in and really believing in the 3 focuses that they have for a quarter, or 1 focus for the month, or however you want to look at it, 7 focuses for the year, like whatever your number is in your time frame. If you don't have that, then anything that has urgency will also feel important, because you haven't defined importance. And so that's why you do fire drills and you run from thing to thing, because their importance isn't defined. So urgent is a proxy for importance. And so, oh my God, like we're losing these competitive deals. We got to go figure out and redo all our competitive intelligence right now. And then 2 weeks later, oh my God, like we don't have enough pipeline. Guys, we got to spin up new sequences. We got to get some new data from Zoom Info. And then 2 weeks later, oh my God, like we're losing on seat price, and we got to get negotiations together. And you guys got to figure out how to land these deals at a higher cost. And guess what? You've done 3 things in 6 weeks, and 0 of them mattered. And all of them were like class A BS solutions, because you didn't really launch in. Like, you got to know your business. Your job as a leader is to know your business well enough to say, you know what? I do believe that the negotiations is drastically hurting our business based on the data from last quarter. That is one of our priorities. Those other 2 things are not on my priority list. I'll put them on a list to investigate at the next time that I evaluate my priorities to see if that changes. But right now, I know one thing: negotiations is best for my business. So that's all I'm looking at right now. And that's like the hardest thing to do as a leader, but it's the thing that you're most grateful for. Like when my success person or CRO or CEO comes to me right now and says, Mark, we need you to do this. I said, listen, I'll tell you at the beginning of the quarter, my priorities. Like, I can't change them. They're based on data. I validated them with you and with other people. We're committed to these, and I can't substitute something in ahead of them that is going to cause these 3 things that we've all agreed is most important to suffer. Now, that doesn't mean you can't slip something in every now and then, but I'm telling you, the slightest pebble can cause the biggest wave in your still pond if you let it. And I just don't like pebbles in my still pond. Let me be Zen, floating 2 inches above in a Buddhist stance, like get my shit done everywhere. No pebbles. See what I'm saying?
Is he that Zen? I don't feel like he's that Zen in the workbench, Brooke. Is this real?
How's that look?
Very calm.
Very natural. Looks natural.
Rehearsed, practiced.
Well, okay, so I can't agree that, you got to have your priorities at the beginning of the quarter and stick to those. But as you're scaling, how do y'all think about like how much of that comes from your operations team, your heads of the sales team, just making decisions, enablement? Like, where do you see your different stakeholders fitting into like, okay, like not only deciding on what the priorities are, but like who's going to do what to execute? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
I think so. Like, I mean, you have to know, and Mark's referencing it, and I'm not sure exactly like the audience on this call, and Mark's in a position where he gets to determine a lot of those things. Sometimes a sales manager may not get to choose all those things. They may be coming from Mark or Brooke or someone. But, I would put it like, you can identify pretty clearly, most of us at the beginning of the year at SKO, most of us know, here are the things that my team needs to deliver. We need, this segment of the market is doing X million dollars of revenue. How you get there, we expect this, figure it out. One of the things that I think Mark referenced, and I do believe happens a lot, Brooke, to your point, is like you start quibbling over the facts after the thing has started. It's like, if I was trying to lose weight and I'm like, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds in the next 2 months, but then like two weeks in, I'm like, actually, I don't think it's the pounds. I want to lose like 1.5 inches off my belt size. And like, I start changing the targets, or I start maneuvering around because it might be easier, make me look better, or feel like it's going to get accomplished. Like, that's where people get really, I think, disenfranchised and frustrated and confused. And so it's key to be upfront, be transparent, have like very clear understanding of the KPIs, the outcomes that you want to drive to. And then you have to understand how it builds to it. Like, it can't be, well, we're going to crash diet this week, and then next week I'm going to run 10 miles a day, and then the next week I'm going to crash diet again. Like, it's got to be something that's executable for at least some amount of time to see if it's working.
Yeah, listen, I remember in the early days of outreach, and I used to, a lot like you, Brooke, you were there too, is we had to wear way more hats than we had heads. And that's part of startup life. But and if you thrive in that environment and you can go from startup to startup to startup and provide value and all that, and you can live in that chaos, that's great. But like, the point of a company is to become an organized, predictable revenue growth generator. And you can't accomplish that by staying in startup mode. So eventually you got to kind of, and this is the wrong word, you got to grow up, you got to mature, you got to develop the discipline and the tactics of a company that the startup is supposed to be, right? And so listen, in the beginning, if I had been super focused on 3 things a quarter, would outreach be where it is today? Probably not. But if I ran around like a startup person right now, I definitely wouldn't accomplish the things I need to do. So part of it is you got to have a little bit of self-awareness and situational awareness and apply the right kind of, prioritization mechanism to the situation.
Yeah, for sure. Starting with an outline first before you get like super granular and like hardcore directions for everybody. And thinking about like how process needs to change with companies. I think the way that people have coached is changing too, because there's just so much more data at our fingertips. Like, we got a lot more resources now as frontline people managers or in enablement to help chart the course for reps. I think data availability is something that's changed over the last several years, but now that we're all remote, another wrench thrown in there. Where do you two see like coaching continuing to change? Like, what do you think is going to be next for coaching outside of just data? Now we got to use all that data. Everybody's remote. What do you think might change in the next couple of years?
I'm glad you brought that up, Brooke. I mean, we kind of see this thing where we have more visibility to all the myriad of every interaction around a salesperson to the customer. Like, we know what they said. We know if the email was read. We know if it was replied to. We know the last time they touched this account. The challenge is that the manager or the leader or the enablement person, oftentimes they're drowning in all of this data and they don't know the insights and they don't have a very clear action to take. And so we've gotten pretty good at it with a customer. Like, if a customer does this thing, what's the next best action, or what's a prescribed next best action? But it's really not. I think that it's still very difficult. And we see it all the time. Companies struggle with, like, where does that live? How do I get visibility to, are these actions working? Like, when someone, when we do put a rep in a plan, do they become more successful? When we prescribe them a training or some type of content to hopefully improve them, does it work? And so this idea that, like, we have to turn that same knob of data into visibility and insights that are useful in the same way that we've done for customer prospect data. That's, I think, the next phase, where we get a lot smarter and we get a lot more aware of how do we get our reps to be more successful.
Yeah, I agree. A huge hurdle in coaching so far is there's only a certain percentage of managers that can kind of connect the dots. Well, your meeting booking is low. It looks like you're reaching out to mostly low-level people, and you're taking too long to get back to people in your inbox that are high level, and there's not enough of them, so you're not going to hit your meeting load. Like, that's a lot of dots to connect. And I think just bringing it down into an insight of respond to high-level personas faster, you know what I mean? And then in, like an outreach or your sales engagement platform, like, it tells you to do that right in the spot. And to me, that's the innovation, which is the way that coaching has always worked has been like this. I ride with my rep. We go into a sales call. Right before we go in, we say, don't forget to talk about these things. They go do their thing. If I'm a really horrible manager, I do things like kick them under the desk and all that to let them know that they're doing something stupid, or I interrupt and take over the call. And then after the call, we get together and we talk about what happened. And then that has progressed to now, like, everybody does the call and they have some, semi-valuable technology that records the call. And after the call, you sit down and you listen to the call together, or you know what I mean? So now, instead of the 30-minute call, you now have a 30-minute call, a 30-minute review session to listen to the call. 30 minutes to coach about the call. Now that call's taking an hour and a half to get like any kind of real value out of it. Like seems broken to me. That's where we're at now, which is still better than me traveling to South Carolina to ride with my rep for 3 days and not being able to talk to anybody else. So we're getting better. The future is this. How do you coach a rep in the conversation when they need to change their behavior right then and there to change the outcome of the call? And to me, that's like when we talk about skill coaching and stuff like that, that's the true innovation. Is I'm on a call and I hear my competitor listed, and proactively I'm served up with the right talk track that helps me convert that call and get over that objection. Or they ask me, I have a huge product catalog that I serve, and they ask me about a specific technical detail on a product that I'm not familiar with. And that detail pops up in real time and says, here's what you need to do, rather than me say, hey, let me get back to you. Then I sent you an email you never replied to. Then we have to schedule another meeting. And now the deal's flagged 3 weeks just because I didn't know the answer, because it was impossible for me to memorize the entire product catalog and all the specifications. So like, to me, that's where we're going, is that the future of coaching is how do I help the rep real time in the moment when they need it most, when they can shrink the deal cycle, when they can affect the outcome while they're still in the middle of the war. Like, that's the thing that that I think that great sales orgs are starting to get into. And I think that that's like the future is no more of this like film study that you do as a Monday morning quarterback. You now get to be the head coach in the huddle, telling the team, you better run, a 5-yard out when it's 3rd and 3 and the game's on the line.
Yeah. So to summarize, coaches, often fail because they're doing things off the cuff and or they're flying blind. They just have no idea what they're doing. Definitely was/is me, working to get better every day. And they're struggling to connect the dots. So as a leader, if you can provide your managers and your reps, honestly, too, with like a clear process, they know what they're focusing on, so it doesn't feel like every day is a fire drill and like this is chaos, mayhem city. I've got structure and an operating rhythm of like, I know when I have a one-on-one and how to prepare. I know when I have a pipeline review or whatever it is, call reviews, we got SDRs. And that idea of just-in-time coaching, because my opinion, people learn when they have to. Like I sat in driver's ed and I don't remember any of the things that happened. And then when I was behind the wheel of the car, I was like, okay, now I remember the rules because someone's yelling at me and there's traffic and this is terrifying. Did I miss anything, you think?
Good summary.
All right. Well, folks, we've got a couple minutes here for questions. I see Mark already answered one in the chat. If you got any, throw them our way. Otherwise, Brian and Mark, if folks want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to come find you on the internet these days?
Ambition.com. It's easy. It's an easy website to find. Happy to connect. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Tratuschold. Love to connect with you all, and appreciate everyone coming.
LinkedIn is the best place to get me. You can, if you DM me, I usually will get back to you. So yeah, that's the best place.
Same here. Alrighty. Well, folks, if you got any questions that you're stewing on later, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, morning, evening, wherever in the world that you are. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brooke.
Yep. Thank you, guys.